Hello everybody and big welcome to our free top tips tutorial. For anybody that's only new, we have hundreds of these tutorials all uploaded to our free YouTube channel. All you have to do is search Case Flower School. And again, if you're a newbie joining us, what I recommend, pop off and get your notebook and pen, because I'm going to give you all the latest top tips for treatment and conditioning of roses, but today specifically more the David Austin roses. I do have lots of tutorials on normal standard roses already uploaded to YouTube. Again, I would really appreciate if you shared our videos, especially if you happen to be a member of maybe a flower club or a floral society or any flower kind of group out there. We'd really appreciate if you shared our videos in among them groups, and again, share your ideas with our flowery friends out there. So first thing to write down, roses, or rosa as the Dutch kind of refer to them, is really the flower that signifies love. So it's definitely one of the more popular flowers. They're available all the year round, and you can get them in most colours. I suppose the only two colours that you can't really get is there's no true black rose. You'll hear people talking about a black rose, but it's the black baccarat. It's not really a black rose. And most black roses that you see on social media have probably been photoshopped to get them shades. Or again, there's I can't think of the words that would be on the screen to kind of like distort a filter to distort the colour. The other rose that you can't get is a true blue rose. Now there is blue sprayed roses and dyed roses out there, but again they don't naturally come in a blue shade. So again, it's probably a filter, or again it has been photoshopped if say a bride comes to you with her Pinterest photographs. So most other colours readily available. They normally last anything between 7 and 14 days, but that depends on the variety of the rose, and it also depends on the length of the stem. The longer the stem, obviously the better quality of the rose. Now normally roses like kind of cooler conditions, so anything between 2 and 5 degrees Celsius. So obviously if you have them in cool conditions, you're definitely going to get up to 2 weeks out of your rose. But most houses are much warmer than that, so when your customer has it in a warm room, it's obviously going to affect the longevity of the roses. And it's really up to you to educate your customer and kind of say, well, if they're kept in 2 to 5 degrees, they can last up to 2 weeks. But obviously if they're in your home and it's in around, in 18 or 20 degrees, you'll probably be lucky to get 1 week out of them. Now, with all flowers, remove the plastic, right? The plastic allows the ethylene gas to escape, and roses are definitely sensitive to ethylene gas. Ethylene gas would be released from old fruit and veg, or older flowers is inclined to give off a lot more ethylene gas. The next thing is they're very sensitive to bacteria. Now all flowers are sensitive to bacteria, but especially roses. So the vases and the buckets that you use for storing your flowers in have to be scrupulously clean. As I say to our students, if the bucket is not clean enough to drink out of, it's not clean enough for your flowers to drink out of. So we always recommend our students to sterilise all their buckets and vases using domestic bleach. I have already uploaded tutorials on sterilising buckets and vases to our YouTube channel, so off you go and you can search them. Normally, like when you have roses in for a little while and you want to dry them, they're really easy to dry. Literally tie an elastic band or a string around the end of them, hang them up in a well ventilated dark area, and in 2 to 3 weeks you have your dried roses. Normally they will lose their colour, so just to be aware of that. But today's class I wanted to give a little bit more information about a particular variety of roses. Now these have just arrived and they haven't been conditioned and they haven't been hydrated, but I just want to show you them in this stage, and I will continue on this video in another 4 days and I'll let you see what they've actually kind of grown into. So write down in your notes David Austin, okay? So David Austin roses, a lot of people that would grow roses in their garden would be familiar and would be aware of David Austin, like rose bushes that you can grow in your garden. But also David Austin have like cut roses or cut flower roses, that we can import directly from Holland, and they're ideal for using in especially weddings and events, which is what they would be mostly used for, but also for floral arrangements or event decoration. So there's a couple of different varieties, okay? So the creme de la creme of David Austin roses is the one that's called Patience. People might call it a white rose, but it's more of a creamy white, so just to be aware of that. And it's definitely the most highly scented. Like David Austin roses are known for their scent, and the Patience is definitely the highest scented of all the David Austin roses. So again, if your bride is looking for a highly scented fragrance coming from her bouquet, I would suggest including David Austin roses. What makes them that little bit different is the amount of petals, which you won't see here today, but as I said, I'll continue on this video. There's 165 petals on a David Austin Patience rose. Now like, that's just astronomical towards a normal standard rose, you know that way. And as they open, they will get absolutely huge, as in like a minimum 10 to 12 centimeters the diameter across. Like if you think about it, like that is just amazing. So between the shape, you know that way, the textures of the rose and the fragrance coming from them, they are just amazing. Now a little kind of bit of the bad news, okay? First of all, it takes about 4 days for them to fully open, sometimes 5 days. So keep that into account. If you have a wedding maybe on a Saturday, I would recommend buying the roses in either on your Monday or your Tuesday delivery to get them open to their best on the day of your wedding. But they only last then 6 to 8 days in total, you know the way, so they're not the longest lasting rose, you know the way, out there towards maybe some of the other standard roses that would have, as I said, maybe up to 7 to 14 days. I suppose the scent that you get from the David Austin roses, to try and describe this, I often think back to when I was a child and my granny's garden always had, like, say, rose bushes in the garden, and like walking up the pathway and you got that real old-fashioned rose smell, which you very rarely get nowadays. Well, off the David Austin roses, that's the scent that you get, that real old-fashioned rose fragrance. But with the Patience, you get like a dash of lemon kind of thrown in, a bit like a gin and tonic, you know the way, dash of lemon thrown in for good effect, you know that way. And as I said, like to use it with other highly scented flowers like freesias or hyacinths, it's absolutely amazing. So when you remove the plastic off your flowers, normally the David Austin roses will always come like wrapped up in cardboard. And you can see here where they have like layers of cardboard, you see, between the heads. Now if you've watched any of my other tutorials on standard roses, you will see where I recommend about wrapping up the heads in brown paper to support them while they have their first drink. If you haven't watched any of them tutorials, go and search them for them on our YouTube channel. Now normally I would leave this closed. I just wanted to open it so that you could actually see them. But to be honest, you are not getting the effect or, like, you know, I mean, the visual of what these roses are going to be. That's why I want to continue this video in a couple of days. So what I recommend is leaving your corrugated cardboard. I'll just put a piece of sellotape around this and leave them wrapped like that while they have their first drink. And their first drink will be 6 to 8 hours, not days, 6 to 8 hours in water with the paper on them. I'll give you another couple of tips now in a second. And after the 8 hours, remove the paper and the corrugated cardboard that's kind of like layered in between them. And at that stage then, the flowers will be well hydrated and they will stand up on their own. And then you can kind of like move them into a kind of a slightly warmer room, not a like real warm room. And again, you can encourage them to blow. That's presuming you're going to use them for a wedding. And again, depending on the weather, is it summertime, springtime or wintertime, you can control that. So with all flowers, remove the leaves below the waterline, because any leaves can cause bacteria to grow in the water. And remember, we said everything has to be scrupulously clean. They are very sensitive to bacteria. The next thing is, if I'm using them in a hand-tied bouquet, I am inclined to like run the stem stripper down them, you know that way, and it kind of removes kind of like any little prickles that's on the stem, you know that way, makes it easier to manage, but like that's not necessary, by the way. Then what I do is I cut at least an inch, 1 to 2 centimeters off the end of all the roses, and I cut them on a 45-degree angle. When you cut your stems on a slant, you open up a bigger hole than if you cut straight across. And then that way your flowers will drink the water up faster. I would recommend in the first 8 hours, while they're wrapped up in the cardboard, is to cut them. So you cut them and you place them in the bucket of water, and 4 hours later I want you to cut them again. And then in 8, and just take a centimetre off them. And then in the 8 hours, take the paper off them, but recut them again. And if you do that in the first day or two, like roughly like every 4 hours, again you will hydrate the stems really well and you'll get a longer lasting rose, you know what I mean, yourself. Then once they start blowing, I would recommend maybe cut them once a day. Again, if you want to hold them back from blowing, don't cut them. If you want to encourage them to blow, cut them that little bit more often. And change the water every 2 to 3 days, because again, they are sensitive to any bacteria that would be growing in the water, and I definitely recommend using flower food. Hopefully you got that all wrote down. Listen, again, if you have any questions, post all your questions in the comments below. We always respond to all our questions, all our comments. Again, a little reminder, I'd really appreciate if you shared this video for us. And again, for anybody that has joined us, my name is Janette and I'm from Case Flower School.